Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is TVP World. You're watching World News. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and these are the latest headlines. Voters across Germany will soon head to the polls to elect a new government. 4 candidates are in the race for Chancellor: incumbent Olaf Scholz of the Social Democratic Party, CDU leader Friedrich Merz, Robert Habeck of the Greens, and Alice Weidel of the AfD. According to the latest polls, the CDU is leading with 30% of the vote, followed by the AfD at 20%. Olaf Scholz SPD is trailing with around 16%, while the Greens are expected to secure 13%. At a campaign rally on Friday, Merz again ruled out any coalition with the AfD, saying the CDU would seek other partners to form a government. The AfD was previously excluded from power despite winning a plurality in last year's Thuringia state elections, as other parties upheld the so-called firewall tradition of blocking parties deemed to be extremists from governing. Polish President Andrzej Duda met with the U.S. President Donald Trump at the Conservative Political Action Conference, the largest gathering of the American right near Washington, D.C. According to the White House, Trump reaffirmed the strong alliance between the United States and Poland and praised Duda for Poland's commitment to increasing defense spending. The meeting, which lasted less than 10 minutes, was held behind closed doors with no media present. Shortly after, Trump took to the stage at CPAC, reinforcing his ties with international allies like Poland.
U.S. President Donald Trump told me not to worry about anything. What was extremely important for me, he said, listen, you are one of the most credible allies. Your defense spending, purchases in the United States, which you carry out, all the contracts we have with the United States, these are bonds that are tightening. In terms of Ukraine, I also had a one-on-one conversation with the president where he told me, in short, what his plan of action is. He said he has to lead the negotiations and there is no other way out there. There is the only way for the war to end, but in my opinion it also means strengthening Ukraine as well as American presence in Ukraine. Maybe we are not talking about a military presence because President Donald Trump didn't say that, but he talked about economic ties which he wants to tighten with Ukraine. He said that he wants tight cooperation and that he will certainly negotiate this with Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
President Duda isn't the only European leader engaging with Washington. A slew of European leaders is set to visit the United States in the coming days to discuss ending the war in Ukraine and pushing for a European role in a potential peace deal. French President Emmanuel Macron will be in Washington on Monday.
With the Trump administration's hesitation to bring Ukraine and Europe to the negotiating table regarding peace in Russia, European leaders have reaffirmed their support for President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. They have also stressed their commitment to common security goals. Poland has been a staunch ally of Ukraine and a central transport hub for humanitarian aid and military equipment coming from the West since the beginning of Russia's invasion. Prior to his arrival in the U.S., the Polish president posted on X that he had spoken with his Ukrainian counterpart on the phone.
I conveyed to him that we consistently believe there is no other way to stop the bloodshed and achieve lasting peace in Ukraine except with the support of the United States. For this reason, I suggested to President Zelenskyy to remain committed to the cause of calm and constructive cooperation with U.S. President Donald Trump.
Senior members of the Trump administration, including U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, have praised Poland's defense spending and commitment to security.
We see Poland as the model ally on the continent, willing to invest not just in their defense, but in our shared defense and in the defense of the continent.
Leaders of other countries are also planning on visiting the U.S. with their messages. All this after a delegation from the U.S. met with Russian diplomats in Saudi Arabia for talks on ending the war with no representatives from Ukraine or Europe invited. French President Emmanuel Macron is set to meet President Trump at the beginning of next week. Ahead of this meeting with Trump, Macron said that he intends to tell the U.S. president not to be weak in the face of Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Et donc, ce que je vais faire, c'est je vais lui dire.
So what I'm going to do is tell him, fundamentally, you can't be weak with President Putin. That's not who you are. It's not your trademark. It's not in your interest. How will you then be credible with China if you are weak with Putin?
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set to be in the US on Thursday, amid the other meetings, all with the shared goal of bringing an end to Russia's war in Ukraine.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Saturday night that negotiations with Ukraine over resource sharing are, quote, pretty close to a deal. Speaking at the Conservative Political Action Conference, he reiterated that the United States should recoup some of the billions spent on military aid by securing access to Ukraine's deposits.
We gave it in the form of nothing, so I want them to give us something for all of the money that we put up, and I'm going to try and get the war settled, and I'm going to try and get all that death ended. So we're asking for rare earth and oil, anything we can get. But we feel so stupid. Here's Europe. And you know, it affects Europe. It doesn't really affect us, except we don't like to see two things. Number one, how Biden got us into this thing in the first place. Terrible. But why is it that he didn't ask for equalization? Europe should put up more money than us. But even if you said the same thing, how come we went so far out front? And he didn't know that Europe gets his money back. They did it in the form of a loan. We don't get our money back. We get nothing. So we're getting our money back. We're going to get our money back because it's not fair. It's just not fair. And we will see. But I think we're pretty close to a deal, and we better be close to a deal, because that has been a horrible situation.
With the war in Ukraine set to enter its fourth year on Monday, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has thanked Ukraine's allies for the continued support. In his nightly address, he emphasized the importance of security guarantees and once again stressed that any peace negotiations must include both Ukraine and its allies.
Security guarantees are something that is very important to us. Europe, the US and all our partners in the world need a common approach to ensure that Putin can no longer deceive anyone and that Russia cannot bring death to other nations, any nation from Ukraine and Europe to Syria and the countries of the Middle East and Africa. In the last 30 years we have seen too much destruction and death, for which Russia is to blame, the Russian army, its special forces, its mercenaries. The world needs guarantees, and I thank everyone for their support. In fact, we are talking with all our partners about security guarantees and concrete manifestations of support, actions, assistance, decisions, messages. Now, on the eve of the third anniversary of the start of the full-scale war, it is important for all Ukrainians that the world stands with us, that we stand in a strong position, that we stand with the fundamental goals and principles of the UN Charter regarding the sovereignty of nations, the territorial integrity of each state, and the protection of every nation in the world from aggression. Justice should not be an empty word, and it is important for every nation.
And court employees are protesting a new measure introduced by Viktor Orban's government. Concerns over judicial independence have long been an issue, but a policy linking judge salaries to government-backed reforms has sparked fresh outrage.
Thousands of Hungarian judges, court staff and supporters marched to the Ministry of Justice. They demand judicial independence, freedom of expression and better pay.
Our first cause is to protect judicial independence. We are not saying it has been eliminated. However, there are signs that it is under threat.
The rule of law in Hungary has been put in question ever since Prime Minister Viktor Orban came into power in 2011. He has regularly clashed over the issue with other European leaders. Brussels has frozen billions of euros over Budapest's backsliding on the issue. In December 2023, over 10 billion euros were unfrozen, around the time Orban dropped his opposition to Ukraine initializing accession talks. The EU claimed Hungary has made progress in addressing rule of law issues. New measures by the government put judicial independence under pressure. According to the proposal, salaries for judges and other court workers will be tied to broader reforms coming from the government being implemented. Critics argue the new rules are aimed to squeeze judges financially into ruling the way the government wants them to. The government has dismissed the protests.
The judges go out on the street to demonstrate to protect the independence of judges. Europe has not seen many judges protest.
While the various judges' bodies have agreed to the government proposals, protesters accuse the government of putting them under pressure to sign.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says that the fight for conservative values, quote, is not just an American battle, it is a Western battle. Speaking on Saturday, she praised U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance's recent address at the Munich Security Conference, where he criticized several European free speech policies. Meloni made her remarks during a live address from Italy at the American Conservative Political Action Conference, CPAC.
CPAC understood before many others that the political and cultural battle for conservative values is not just an American battle. Vice President Vance was discussing something deeper: identity, democracy, freedom of speech. In short, Europe's historic role and mission. Many pretended to be outraged, calling for European pride against an American daring to lecture us. But let me tell you, as someone who is proud to be European, first, if those who were outraged had shown the same pride when Europe lost its strategic autonomy, tying its economy to autocratic regimes, or when European borders and our way of life were threatened by mass illegal migration, now we would live in a stronger Europe.
Pope Francis is in critical condition after experiencing a severe asthma-like respiratory crisis on Saturday, according to a Vatican statement. The 88-year-old pontiff remains conscious but is receiving high-flow oxygen therapy. On Saturday, officials said that he was, quote, more unwell than yesterday. He has also undergone blood transfusions to treat anemia. Francis has been hospitalized with double pneumonia at Rome's Gemelli Hospital since February 14th. While the latest update on his condition is unusually detailed, his medical team has not provided a prognosis. An ice skating marathon in Kuopio, Finland saw two Polish women reach the podium on Saturday. Natalia Trawanka won the women's 50-kilometer race, while Luisa Zlatkowska, who placed third, reflected on the challenges competitors faced before the event.
It is cold, the wind is blowing and the ice is very cracked, so we expect that falls may occur. With fatigue at high speed, these falls can be unpleasant, but we won't give up. Neither myself nor Natalia have ever raced on natural ice, and indeed, we are quite surprised by the quality of it. I wouldn't say we are scared, but we see that it will definitely be a challenge for us. It is going to be extreme, it is going to be hard, and I think it's going to take more than 2 hours to complete the distance of 50 kilometers. Luisa and I will certainly support each other. We will fight because our mental perseverance, our psyche, will play a decisive role. We will have to fight against the forces of nature, the cold and the wind, over a long period of time.
And with that, we conclude this edition of World News. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.